Welcome, friends, to the House of Common show. 10 guys, 10 opinions, one common goal. We want to thank you for tuning back in to hang out with us on iTunes or on podcasts. Yes, we are now in the audio sphere. The brand is strong. We are out here on Podcast Live. You can find us on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts. Thank you for the correction there, Timothy Sills. By searching the words House of Common Show. But if you're watching this digitally on YouTube, you can find us by searching the words House of Common Show. We are now above the UK Parliament. We have now made the jump.
Yeah.
Gang, gang.
We have moved up in the ranks. And if you are watching us on YouTube, keep on watching. Keep on liking the videos, keep on leaving comments, and make sure to subscribe to the channel. And special props to anybody who on Facebook or on Instagram or on Twitter who has actually shared our videos with your friends. That expands the brand.
Yeah.
You are one of the reasons why the brand is getting stronger and stronger each day and each week. The house does not work without neighbors, so we thank you for being neighbors to the boys. And keep on sending encouragements through the DMs and asking us questions about how we do the show and questions that we can add to the show. Well, we appreciate you for watching and for listening. You know, the news that we see, a lot of it, especially in the 24-hour news cycle shows, they're more so built on opinion, and editorials are not really necessarily built on actually telling the news. The news has been told on these. The news has been told by young people sharing stories of injustice, by young people sharing stories of brutality and putting it on display. Things that were once hidden or talked about in the background, they are now in the forefront. And you know, I don't want to use the words "I can't wait to see what happens next," but there is a social, it's not social unrest, it's a social change that's happening, and it's causing us to kind of really, all of us, reevaluate what things look like. That being said, there are still systems in place that are affecting the way that the world is, and specifically systematic racism. And I know a number of people who have asked that question: what is systematic racism? Or the statements will be made, well, that's racist, or this is racist, or these people can be racist, but these people can't be racist. So we want to talk about that for a little bit. Reem, you have worked in different spheres of influence. You've worked in churches. You've also worked in the community here in Toronto. Talk to us a little bit about systematic racism and what you see and how you've experienced that in your leadership.
Yeah, so one of the things that's been very interesting since this whole George Floyd movement is been having a lot of conversations with individuals who would make the statement that they don't believe that systemic racism exists in Canada, that's an American thing. But as you said, I have worked within the community. I actually was a youth worker for the city of Toronto for many years before I came into ministry and started working in the church. And I can remember when I first started working for the city of Toronto as a youth worker, just one of the things that was just really alarming to me was when I came in there and I was actually put in a very marginalized, disenfranchised community to work in. And my thing in terms of when I went there, was I believe that God had placed me there to try and affect change for the good. And one of the things that I believed wholeheartedly to affect that change was to really stress the importance of education and exceeding, and specifically for the young people within education system. And so one of my first initiatives when I started working there is I wanted to create an initiative where to help kids that are transitioning from elementary school into high school. And my thought process was if I could help them to start off well in terms of high school, that it would help them as they build up, like to build upon that, and to by the time that they graduate, set themselves up for success. And so with this program, one of the things I did was I asked all the kids, the youth within the community, to let me know of the classes that they were going to be taking the first semester of high school. And something that was really alarming for me is as these kids were all giving me what they were going to be taking, all of them were putting were showing me that they were taking applied courses. So now, for those who don't know what applied courses are, maybe you're part of a different educational system, but within Ontario, applied courses are for individuals who want to streamline themselves to either only go to college, and I'm not, when I say college, not university, but college, or go straight into the workplace. And if you wanted to go to university, you cannot do that, because what happens is you start off in applied courses and then you start taking college level courses. And so all of them were taking applied courses, and the first thing I was saying, why are you guys taking applied courses? You guys are setting yourselves up in terms of making that ceiling lowered, or that lid lowered, for you in your future. And they told me that they were told by their teachers and their guidance counselors to take applied courses. So the people that are supposed to be the experts, the ones that they're supposed to look to guide them for success, were telling them to take general level courses, applied courses, which would set them up to not be able to go to the highest levels of education. And I remember when they told me, I didn't believe that they would that this would be the case. So I actually went into the schools, and so there was 5 schools within that community. I went and visited the administration and the guidance counselors, and it was crazy how it seems as though they were all told the same exact response, that if anybody was to say anything in regards to this issue, something along the lines, I can't remember verbatim, but something along the lines of, we recognize where these kids are coming from, and we don't want to overwhelm them. We want to let them feel as though they can succeed, and so we don't want to give them something that they cannot handle.
Right.
And I was like,
Wow.
wow, what you guys are
Brutal.
basically saying is that you guys don't think that they can do more than the general level stuff. And so that was what was that from there. That was crazy. But the other thing when I did that initiative was, I also needed some funding, because I wanted to bring in some people who have done certain things within their careers that would be able to show these people of color, or these people are just disenfranchised, people that look like them are doing really cool things, but I want to be able to give honorariums to these individuals. So speaking to my supervisor, he told me to speak to the local MPP of the area, to try and get funding, because he can fund stuff like this. And so, and he gave me direction in terms of the proposal to put it to create, and the things that we need to do. And we worked really hard as a team. I had a staff that was behind me, and we put it together, a proposal, and I presented it to the MPP. And what was interesting was, in that moment, was after I was done, he was like, wow, I'm really quite surprised. This was really well done. That's his exact words. This was really well done. And it's really good to see that there's somebody from communities that you're representing here, having to have somebody advocating for them. But then he went on to say, and there was a but I just want to be totally blunt with you. I'm not going to provide any type of funding towards this initiative. As amazing as this is, I'm not going to provide any funding towards this initiative. And I asked him why. You just told me that it was great. I'm just curious why. And his response was, well, the individuals that you have here, they don't vote. The individuals that you're representing, they don't vote. And I got to be honest with you. This is my job, and I want to keep my job. And the way that I keep my job is to please the individuals that keep me in my job, the ones that vote. And then he went on to list, he had the different demographics and the areas of the people that vote, and such and such. And he said, so with that being said, what I would encourage you to do is to go back to those that you represent, and let them know the importance of the vote. Now, on the flip side, that was a moment for me where I realized the power of a vote. And we as a community, yes, there's things that are being done to us, but the ways in which we can change that is if we put ourselves and we come together, where we become the majority of the vote, the majority in the vote, so that we can have a louder voice for change. Otherwise, these systemic things that are out at place will continue to perpetuate itself,
Exactly.
because we're not doing our part to be able to have a voice to affect change.
Yeah, and people assume when you talk about systemic issues in race and injustice that it's always about in the states. And Canada has that same history of systems holding people down, and because information is like a key, and when you don't have that key, you don't have access to the knowledge and the know-how, and how to perpetuate the change for betterment, generation by generation. In Canada alone, we had the Indians Act, we had the Chinese head tax, we legalized slavery, we did all these things, the 60 scoop, where we even had legal slavery. And I know that was a time ago, but also when you look at it in modern day, when you look at people who are hiring managers, my brother was a hiring manager, and this is how I found some of this information out. He's like, if you don't represent the values that they want to see, and if you don't look like them, then you will never get the job that you're looking for. People hire who looks like them, who behave the way that they do. So the systemic stuff is systematic, and I also believe like the information portion is huge because a young kid, Kareem, would not know to say, hey, I need to have those academic classes, not just applied classes. Then they don't know what to stick up for. But I guarantee you that there are other kids that are there whose parents have spoken to them before they ever got to their guidance counselor meetings and say, now, when you're picking your courses, I need to
Make
see what you're
sure.
doing, and I need to know exactly which one you are. Because do you know that this, and this, and this? I got caught in the very same thing where I ended up having to do a year of summer school after I had already done my 4 years of high school, because for me to have to go into university, I didn't have the right math, and I had done the wrong thing the whole way through, and I had to take 2 courses. But again, if those things are not explained to you, and if those barriers are placed on you by a teacher who thinks they're going to help you, or a teacher who thinks that that you only have this limitation, then you're never going to see the full potential of what you can do. And I think we have to have those type of education moments, especially in terms of education, in terms of finance, in terms of real estate, in terms of position and power, in terms of politics. All these things are places where different and unique voices need to be, and not keep the voice, not of oppression, but voice of people who are looking to only magnify or amplify from within, those type of things. We don't want to have a monolithic type voice that only speaks in one specific way. We want to have a diverse voice that represents the community. I said this today on another call with somebody. How come we've had West Indian people in Toronto for how long, and we don't have a proper representation in city councils and student board meetings and all these different places and committees that we should have, because the people that are there look the same way and have the same values, and we don't appreciate the diversity that we do have within our cultures.
Yeah, and to make something look, we got to look now as today. You mentioned a whole bunch of stuff from the past, but I'm going to give you some stats from today, and that's 2020, 2019. The Ontario Rights Commission, as of last year, black people are 20 times more likely to be killed in an encounter with a police than white people. That's
Facts.
from 2019. CBC came out with a stat. Halifax, black people are 6 times more to be carded. If you don't know what carded is, somebody can stop you, ask you for your information, ask you for ID. They are 6 times more to be carded than a white person in Halifax. Vancouver, the other side of the country, in 2017 they did a survey, and they are 5% more to be spot checked by police officers. Now, here's the thing. In Vancouver, they only make up 1% of the population. Yet they are 5% of spot checks are of black people. It almost sounds like every black person is being checked. And so these are stats of today. And so when you think of systemic racism, you're thinking, I'm not saying that all cops are racist, because we don't believe that. There are some good cops, but they are trained to act a certain way. They are trained to think of certain way, trained to proceed with people in a different way. And so we've got to think of it in terms of the best way was in the book called the Color of Compromise. And basically, They were just saying, that the system is systematic racism is the oppression based on race. It is prejudice plus power equals racism. And so we've got to think about it of those ways. Who has the power, and what are they doing with the power, and how are they inflicting it on the people?
Yeah, and I think it's important that we give special attention to law enforcement and policing and the manner in which they are trained. We said it last week that it's 18 months to become a cop. So literally, an individual who could be racist, who could not, you know what I mean? They have 18 months to learn a job of policing individuals. We have issues where cops who have never grown up in an area, who have never experienced, we have cops who may come from rural towns who are policing inner city areas where the only exposure to minority races have been through MTV music videos and what they witness on Instagram. And so they have no idea how to even perceive the area. It makes me think of that opening scene in The Men in Black where Will Smith is taking that test. And there's all these like aliens that are popping up and stuff, and the other guys that are there, they're shooting all these aliens. But Will Smith, because of his experience, he knows, oh no, that guy's just out to chill. This guy's but the little girl is actually the one that looks off. And so when we think of systemic racism, it's so much more than just labeling and identifying black people, but it's even it goes down to the ability for the cops to perceive and decipher exactly what is a threat for them and whatnot. We also have to think of sorry, I lost my train of thought. I'll leave it there.
One other thing I just wanted to add to that is in terms of is systemic racism here in Canada, does it exist in Canada? Just as we have in the States, we have this thing that we call the projects. We all labeled it the projects. And we as people who have, some of us have grown up in the projects, we call it that. We call it the projects ourselves. But the thing that we got to ask ourselves is, why do we call it the projects? Where did that term come from? I remember somebody when I was coming up, somebody that was kind of a mentor in my life when I was younger, and one of the statements that he made is, and this was for him to say that we have to educate ourselves as those who are disenfranchised, to not just do what even the people that we think we're supposed to look to tell us to do. Why? Because they, in terms of the systemic racism, they're the ones who help to perpetuate the cycles that exist within the areas and the communities that we live in. Why? Because we are a project. We're a project that says if we do this and we do that, if we inject this or if we take that out, our hope is then that the cycle that exists will perpetuate itself. And so in order for us to not get caught up in that cycle, we do need to educate ourselves. We need individuals that have come out, and we need to advocate for those that are coming up, to let them know, don't just go by what people are telling you, because what people are telling you is all that is in place to keep you where you are. This is why, why if you look at stats, and I wish I was prepared for this, this is something that came to my mind now, but I know it was really high when I looked at it last, that those that have grown up in the projects, how many of them actually remain within the projects, and the generations that come after this, and it's a crazy cycle of people that their families before them, the family before them, and the generations before them, generations before them, how many of them have grown up in the projects and have not been able to come out? And really and truly, we all have the opportunity to be able to get out if we allow ourselves to recognize the opportunities that are out there, and if we don't limit ourselves to what we are being told we are supposed to be.
Yeah, Chris, Kareem, I think even at that, man, that is so difficult because there are so many things there's a lot of opportunity out there, but then you look at the demographic and economical barriers that are there. So for instance, I'll just give an example of, let's say homelessness, right? So there may be a homeless shelter that is available. And I've long since for a long time said that no homeless person in Toronto should go hungry. And somebody put me in my place for that because they're like, Adam, you don't understand. There's a lot of resources out there, but the accessibility to those resources is actually the barrier that's there. So that it's like a room that's sitting there that's full of resources for these people. But because of some circumstances that are stacked up against them. So for instance, if we talk about people in the projects, projects. There might be scholarships and whatnot for kids to be able to go to maybe better schools and whatnot. But the stacking against is that maybe they're from a single parent home and they're not actually able to get the right transportation to that area. And so like I agree with you in terms of as minorities, we need to be able to think different to be able to overcome circumstances in that way. But the system is built in such a way that it may take into account some of the things that are actually necessary for the minorities but in order for the minorities to actually come out, you have to take into the whole picture. And I don't think the system is set up to do that. There's a lot of showing face in terms of like, oh, we have this program, this scholarship, and you're able to do this, this, and this. But it's like how many of these kids can actually access that when you take into account where they live, the circumstances of their family, when you look into childcare and all these things like food and all these things that have to go in to this person actually accessing these resources. How many of these kids are actually able to, like, are the resources really there for our kids?
Yeah, and I 100% agree with you. The one thing that I say that is somewhat consistent is, and this is why when I was running that program, when I worked for the city, why that was important to me was at the end of the day, when it comes to the education system, if I take the right courses and I do well in those right courses, when universities look at applications that come in, they don't have the opportunity to see what the community that kid lived in. They don't have the opportunity to see by the name if this person is of color. There's nowhere on the application that says, is this person of color? And what I mean by that, I'm not saying that it's not stacked up against. I 100% agree. I do think that they make it seem they'll provide Band-Aid solutions, and trust me, I saw it all the time working for the city. Band-Aid solutions to make it seem like they're helping, so they show face. But the holistic nature of everything that's going on does not help the community, the individuals that are disenfranchised. I agree, but the next generation coming up, and this is why I believe why they systemically want the young people not to know of the importance of going down a certain path academically, because they know if we can keep them on this path, it doesn't allow that next generation that's coming up to be able to progress as a people and as a culture or community.
I think it's important for us to remember too, and this happens, and I've seen this on social media a lot over the past week. Not a lot, but with few people who feel comfortable doing the gaslighting or the arguing or the, well, what about this stat? What about that stat? Is, I think there's sometimes where people put on Black people, on Afro-Canadians, friends of ours from the African nations, and you come here, is there's this victim mentality.
Yeah.
And what I don't think people really know is that for the most part, most Black people don't see themselves as victims. They work really, really, really hard to get as far as they can, and that's when to kind of blend what Adam and Reem are saying. That's when they realize that the deck is stacked against them. That's when they realize that, like, my name on the application form puts me at a disadvantage. This puts me at a disadvantage, and then it becomes a cycle of what do I do next. But at the beginning stages, most of them, they're not thinking of themselves as victims. They're thinking of themselves as, because they have people like the people on this show and others who are speaking into their lives and saying you can do anything. It's oftentimes the system that kind of destroys that idea. And so hopefully if you're watching this, you have a better sense of what systematic racism is. It's easy to point at something and say it's racist because that person said something or that person did something. It's harder when you realize that those things that they say or do is because of roots that are deep down the ground that have gone on for years and years and years and years and years.